Okay, so here we are, having just recorded this week's Watching Brief episode, which will be coming out tomorrow afternoon, although tomorrow morning, in fact, for our Patreon supporters. And we basically had to clear the agenda this week because of the fire at the Crooked House pub. It's been all over the place, certainly on British news, and you've definitely seen it if you follow Archaeo Soup, for example, on Facebook. And we figured this was a good opportunity to talk a little bit about how we make these watching briefs and encourage you to help us to keep on making them. In fact, Mr. Brockman there is so relaxed that he's currently out in the garden of House Brockman.
I'm decompressing after a rather intense discussion of planning law as it relates to pubs and the threat to heritage sites of arson.
Yeah, so, and of course the possibility.
I'm sat here. I'm sat here with a cup of tea and a dog. And if anyone hears any sort of whipping in the background, it's not an extracurricular activity. It's our awning in the garden that we sit under for shade.
Yeah, the wind catching the awning. But also, of course, right. it was a somewhat interesting recording today because we had to be very aware of the risk of legal repercussions. We were talking about an ongoing investigation, and that sort of awareness. Well, in this instance, I think drove an awful lot of what you were doing to get this story onto Watching Brief, wasn't it?
What we pride ourselves on not doing on Watching Brief is just acting as a mirror reflecting what's on social media or other media for that matter. We don't do what is sometimes referred to as journalism, which is basically taking a press release from somebody, rewriting it a little bit and then claiming it's original content.
Yeah.
But the thing I like to think we've done where our contribution is most effective is on the investigative stuff. Either investigations that we've done ourselves or putting in our sixpenny worth to work that's being done by other people, and that's exactly what's happened this week with the Crooked House story, because you've got a situation where the national media now, newspapers like The Guardian, The Mail, The Times, are running major stories about the Crooked House based on the work that they've done, but it's also picking up on the work that people are putting out into the public domain on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and our, apart from trying to sum up that work and interpret it for our Watching Brief audience, it's trying to add new material of our own. So, for example, since for the last couple of days, I've been asking questions of Historic England about the work that first of all, their attitude and involvement in the Crooked House story, but then also extending that into what is Historic England's view of things like the threat of arson to listed buildings.
Yeah, well, and actually, in the episode that we'll be publishing tomorrow, I think you just got those responses. Was it today? I think, or yesterday?
That's right. The response came in this morning, and it was straight onto Watching Brief this afternoon.
Yeah, and then also there was an announcement as well on the case from local representative again that you were on top of, and that we brought to it.
Yeah.
In the past, we've done fairly in depth over the course of months research into different situations within archaeology. Again, it's one of those things where if you've been watching us for years, you'll know some of these things that we're talking about. But I think for my part, what I think I bring to the team is, first of all, we do a lot of editorializing back and forth, don't we? So I'll often ask you, to be blunt, why should we care about something? And the reason why I ask these questions is to make sure that it matters to people watching, and that we can express it in a way that will matter to people watching as well. So that kind of thing sort of often takes time in really whittling down the in particular, not just having stories or not just having ways of talking about stories that are that run the risk of being filled with jargon or being particularly interested in the ins and outs and comings and goings, for example, in Whitehall in London. So I think we sometimes it feels like we spend hours on the phone preparing for Watching Brief, and I think probably we sometimes do. But also as well, I think those conversations are part of what preempts essentially a conversation as a performance on Watching Brief that hopefully you guys then feel as though you can get involved with as well. On top of that, obviously, there's lots of editing time. There's lots of sometimes fixing the occasional fluff time. There's checking that what we've said isn't legally actionable time. There's all sorts of stuff that goes on. And I mean, do you have any? What's your perspective on, in that sense, the pre and post production aspect of Watching Brief?
Well, in a sense, obviously, I bow to you on the post-production stuff because for people who aren't familiar with us and the way that we work, I'm basically, as I think one famous broadcaster described himself, a gob on a stick.
You're the talent. You're
the talent, as it's sometimes described in the media industry. Yeah, is not always seriously, and Mark is the technical guru and makes the magic happen, cuts out the fluffs, finds the usable takes when we've done something 3 or 4 times. We hope you don't notice that most of the time, but Watching Brief wouldn't happen without that technical support post-production. Pre-production, particularly when we're dealing with an investigation. So, for example, we talked about the Prince of Wales, the work we were doing on HMS Prince of Wales in the Far East, which we did in Watching Brief a few weeks ago, and also today's Watching Brief about the Crooked House. A lot of that I tend to do because that's simply where my specialism lies. As a researcher and basically trying to make sense of a story, not just trying to make sense of a story in terms of getting the story out there, but getting it out there in a way that is intelligible to somebody who's maybe a non-specialist, but who thinks it might be important or thinks it might be interesting.
Also, I would say that for me, I think one of the things that you bring to this as a process is you sometimes say that you see yourself these days as less of an archaeologist and more of a journalist in that sense. But obviously the archaeologist is still there. And so occasionally I'll be very passionate about something again behind the scenes or off camera. I'll be saying, why aren't we talking about this? Or why aren't we going, being really clear about that person, for example, or this thing or that happening. And you bring a sort of a slightly cooler head when it comes to some of these issues, but also as well, I have to say, patience, because one of the things that I'm finding interesting about this way of working, and that I suspect is something that comes into all manner of journalism in that sense, is just building your case. You build up a body of evidence. You have various folders going. You have the patience and the insight to actually look for things. And sometimes I'm bringing stuff to the table in that case, or I'll flag things for you. But often you're not often, more often than not, you're the one who's sifting through it, and you have you have that information. That is a slow and steady process. So it's not just the weekly shows. It's also, I think, I'm enjoying the fact that we have larger projects. That said, though, this summer has really highlighted how we wanted to be able to, for example, travel to certain locations and film on site, or interview people in person, this kind of thing, and we just can't. We've reached a point where growth and development is limited, frankly, by monetary concerns, and also actually the ongoing nature of Watching Brief. All the work we put into it every week is something that's being crystallized in contrast to monetary concerns. We both have partners, for example, who are aware of the work that we do. They support us, but also as well, they remind us that it would be nice to have a bit of support elsewhere as well. In that sense. And so, with that in mind, I'm certainly eager to encourage you to support us, support Watching Brief, and support the work we do. We're both very British about this sort of stuff. We don't want to seem as though we're cap in hand, but we are also, I think, having to really acknowledge that we do provide a lot of hard work and essentially a service that we'd love to see develop, and to develop it needs support. Some of the things that we're thinking of adding to the tier on Patreon, specifically for supporting Watching Brief, include additional content. So things possibly along these sorts of lines. After we record episodes or certain episodes, recording some afterthoughts that only supporters on Patreon, for example, get to see. That won't mean that we gate the episodes. Of course, they'll still be publicly viewable, but some of the extra stuff would be for Patreon supporters. We're thinking of doing live streams, maybe quizzes, Q&As, all that sort of stuff for Patreon supporters to get involved with, and also as well, we can have live streams and Q&As for general consumption on top of that. But again, with a bit of that support, it'd be so much easier to deliver this stuff for people. And also, of course, if you've been following Archaeosip on Facebook, or for example this afternoon on TikTok, you may have seen that we've developed a small collection of badges, pin badges, as little incentives to help to encourage you to support us on Patreon. I've said Patreon a few times now. We have a Patreon. The tier is as little as $1 or £1 per month. These are difficult times, and ironically enough, if you're interested in archaeology, you're possibly likely to be just as hard up as we are. But if even if a 1 in 5, 1 in 10 people who enjoy the work we do are able to support us in that way, it would make a massive difference to how we're able to work. And also it takes some of the stress off the work that we are doing every week. I suppose one more thing I would say, if you're not too keen on Patreon, you can also buy those badges on Etsy. And after the cost of making them, the profits will go back into Watching Brief. So you can buy the badges individually or as a pack. Every now and then we'll be releasing, I think, possibly new designs, new badges. So you can also support us in that way as well. Now, as I say, it's taken quite a lot to get to this point. We keep on saying we're going to talk about this in a serious way. And it's been probably, no joke, 6 months, I think, of thinking and planning and getting to this point. But I think I certainly have got feel much more comfortable just being open and honest with you guys that support would be great. In fact, it is needed. And I think Andy's similar, because I think this summer you were a bit frustrated, weren't you, that you couldn't travel to a particular location to get footage on green archaeology, weren't you?
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is we've prided ourselves, I think, and certainly I've made a point of trying to tell the stories about archaeology and heritage that aren't making it into the mainstream media, because the mainstream media has got too wide a focus or can't commit the resources. And yet there are stories there that are really important that not just heritage people and archaeologists know about, but the wider public knows about.
Yeah.
And particularly when it comes to things like the destruction of the Crooked House, or attempts to exploit historic shipwrecks commercially.
Or the relationship between the public, the practice of archaeology, and the ability to have organisations defending those different aspects of archaeology. Yeah.
That's right, and also how individual rank and file archaeologists, the likes of us, are represented by the organisations that set out to, or really claim to set out to represent us, and how effective that representation is. So if you like, it's archaeology's news and current affairs rather than a paper in a journal of record. I think that that's the special thing that we do that very few, if any, other people are doing, certainly on a consistent level, and that's why I think what we do needs to continue. And if you can help us continue with that work, then we're very grateful.
Yeah, and we'll continue to add to this offering on, especially on Patreon, as and when we can. I think basically the less stressful it is to produce Watching Brief, I think the more creative we'll be able to be in both producing it, but also in interacting with you guys. So as I say, it's taken two British blokes quite a lot to record this, sit down and do it, but we finally are, and hopefully you guys can support us or consider buying a pin, or at the very least share Watching Beef around. Tell other interested archaeologists and people who are interested in history about Watching Brief, just to try and grow the audience as well, because that's another aspect that would definitely help. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for considering. Thank you for your time in the back garden there. Is the wind picking up, or is there another creature around you?
Yeah, it's not quite blowing a hoolie, but just in the time we've been talking, the wind's come up a bit. So yeah, as I said, if people hear a sail whipping in the background, I'm not voyaging down the Thames. I'm not moved from where we started. But yeah,
we missed
it's getting a little bit interesting.
We missed a trick. We should have said, "Poor Andy's just been kicked out of his house.
Yeah.
he needs your help." No. Okay, great. Well, you take care, Andy. You have a good evening. Thank you for watching, guys, and we look forward to seeing what you think of work we've got coming in the near future. There's some interesting episodes, and the episode that was going to be coming out this week but was pushed back off the agenda by the Cricket House with regards to law changes in Poland and metal detecting. That should be coming, I think, next week, so keep an eye out for that. Anyway, until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.